Hello and welcome to Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ.
Good evening, Alma, and good evening to everyone joining the broadcast. Here are the headlines.
North Korea fires anti-aircraft missile ahead of the UN Security Council meeting.
Metro Manila will stay under alert level 4 until October 15, despite a drop in the COVID-19 reproduction rate in the region.
Hawaii's Kilauea volcano, one of the world's most active, has erupted, but its lava so far is limited to its central crater and not threatening inhabited areas.
And an exclusive interview with Mr. Gilbert Santa Maria, the President and Chief Operating Officer of Philippine Airlines. He discussed the background and prospects of PAL's recovery plan as it navigates through the aviation business during a pandemic.
First, North Korea has successfully fired a new anti-aircraft missile, according to state media, as the United Nations Security Council prepares to meet in response to a recent flurry of weapons tests by the nuclear-armed nation. The official Korean Central News Agency said that the anti-aircraft missile had a remarkable combat performance and included twin rudder controls and other new technologies. A picture in the social Rodang Sinma newspaper showed the missile ascending at an angle into the sky from a launch vehicle on Thursday. It's the latest series of tension-raising steps by Pyongyang, which had until recently been biding its time since the change in U.S. administrations in January. In September, it also launched what it said was a long-range cruise missile, and earlier this week tested what it described as a hypersonic gliding vehicle, which South Korea's military said appeared to be in the early stages of development.
Now back here in the Philippines, Metro Manila will stay under alert level 4 until October 15, despite a drop in the COVID-19 reproduction rate in the region, that according to Malacanang. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases has extended the pilot implementation of the alert level system in Metro Manila. To revive the economy, however, the IATF expanded by an additional 10% the allowable indoor capacities of dine-in services, in-person religious services, and personal care services in areas under alert level 4 for fully vaccinated individuals. The reopening of fitness studios and gyms at a limited 20% capacity for fully vaccinated individuals was also approved, provided that all gym workers should also be fully vaccinated. Now, both clients and service providers must also wear masks at all times, and no group activities will be allowed. An additional venue capacity of 10% beyond the prescribed venue or seating capacity was also green-lit for establishments allowed to operate under alert level 4, which have been awarded the Safety Seal certification.
Meanwhile, the leaders of Australia's most populous state resigned amid a corruption investigation, leaving Sydney-siders deep in months of lockdown without a political leader. New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian said she would leave Parliament after an anti-corruption body announced an inquiry into allegations against her. Take a look.
Therefore, it pains me to announce that I have no option but to resign from the office of Premier. My resignation will take effect as soon as the New South Wales Liberal Party can elect a new parliamentary leader. My resignation as Premier could not occur at a worse time, but the timing is completely outside of my control, as the ICAC has chosen to take this action during the most challenging weeks of the most challenging times in the state's history. Resigning at this time is against every instinct in my being and something which I do not want to do. I love my job and I love serving the community, but I have been given no option following the statement that's been issued today.
A state corruption watchdog is investigating allegations, including whether she favored a former boyfriend, then a member of parliament, in the awarding of grants in his electorate. The projects included funding for the Australian Clay Target Association and the Riverina Conservatorium of Music in Wagga Wagga, a small New South Wales town. Berejiklian denied the allegations and said the inquiry into events that occurred between 2012 and 2018 had come in the most challenging weeks of the most challenging times in the state's history.
Staying in Australia, the country will begin to reopen its borders next month. That, according to the country's prime minister, 18 months after citizens were banned from traveling overseas without permission. Scott Morrison said vaccinated Australians would be able to return home and travel overseas within weeks, as 80% vaccination targets have been met. Take a look.
And that is where Australia is now preparing to move. This will happen next month. That's when it'll start happening, from next month. As states move into those 80% vaccination rates, we've already got the technology and the other things in place that will support those states being able, under Phase C of the plan, to enable their residents and citizens to leave the country and return, and also those residents and Australians who are overseas to return to Australia as if they are vaccinated, with uncapped restrictions on their arrival in those states which have moved into that phase.
On March 20th last year, Australia introduced some of the world's toughest border restrictions in response to the coronavirus pandemic. For the last 500 days, countless international flights have been grounded and overseas travel has slowed to a trickle. Families have been split across continents. An estimated 30,000 nationals were stranded overseas, and foreign residents were stuck in the country, unable to see friends or relatives.
Meanwhile, Ho Chi Minh City on Friday lifted a stay-at-home order that had kept its 9 million residents indoors for a few months now and devastated businesses in the economic hub of Vietnam. Here's Gwyneth Apostol joining us live from Vietnam. Hello, Gwyneth.
Hello, Alma.
Go ahead.
Here's the news from Vietnam. Ho Chi Minh City on Friday lifted the stay-at-home order that had kept its 9 million residents indoors for 3 months and devastated business in Vietnam's economic hub. To curb a fast-spreading wave of COVID-19, which has struck the southern metropolis particularly hard, residents have been unable to leave home, even for food, and almost all travel in and out of the area was suspended. Almost half of Vietnam's total 790,000 cases were reported in the city, along with 3/4 of the country's deaths. But after a gradual fall in cases, soldiers began dismantling road barriers on Friday and removing hundreds of checkpoints that had separated city districts. Roads were busy for the first time in months, after most businesses were given the go-ahead to reopen and vaccinated people permitted to move freely within the city. Although authorities have kept a ban on travel to other provinces, thousands of families traveling by motorbike gathered at a checkpoint on the way out of the city, hoping to return to their hometowns. More than a third of Vietnam's 100 million people were under stay-at-home orders this summer, bringing the country's important manufacturing industry to its knees and breaking supply chains. Its economy suffered its heaviest contraction on record in the third quarter. Factories in industrial parks and goods transportation services are among businesses allowed to reopen. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you very much, Gwyneth, for that. Micah, thank you for that report. Stay safe always. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Alma. Reporting live from Vietnam. This is my Gwyneth Apostol. We live in interesting times.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
This portion is brought to you by North Luzon Express Terminal.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back to the news. Earlier, we were able to talk to Mr. Gilbert Santamaria, the President and Chief Operating Officer of Philippine Airlines. He discussed the background and prospects of PAL's recovery plan as it navigates through the aviation business during a pandemic. Let's listen in.
And today we are privileged to have on the show the President and Chief Operating Officer of the Philippine Airlines, Mr. Gilbert Santamaria. Mr. Santamaria was a former COO of the US-based BPO company Ibex Global. He has a master's in public and private management from the Yale University School of Management and a BS in electrical engineering from the University of the Philippines in Diliman. Now, Philippine Airlines has been in the business for 80 years and a long-revered company and a symbol of Filipino pride. Just like any other airline around the world, our national carrier is no exception to the impact of the pandemic. Now, to the common traveler, the filing of Chapter 11 bankruptcy is quite jolting news. Just to be clear with our viewers, Chapter 11 bankruptcy, also known as reorganization or rehabilitation bankruptcy, is different from liquidation bankruptcy, wherein the business must sell off its assets to pay the creditors. Chapter 11 gives the company opportunity to reorganize and to re-emerge as a healthier business. Now, on that note, Mr. Santamaria, welcome to the program. May I call you Gilbert?
Please, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. I remember you telling me before that you prefer to be called Gilbert. Now, can you quickly run through us the effect of the pandemic on our national carrier, beginning with March 2020?
March 2020, a number of different things happened. All our revenue disappeared the middle of March, and fuel prices collapsed, which means we were upside down on our hedges. So we ended up having a severe liquidity crunch, as well as a situation where we became essentially untenable, losing significant amounts of revenue, $2 billion in that particular year last year, and pretty much $2 billion relative to 2019 this year. So the pandemic has been a terrible force to contend with.
That's true. But in spite of all the dreadful news we have been reading about businesses and economies, Philippine Airlines has mounted a recovery plan in response to the challenges of this pandemic. This is good news. We'd like to know more about PAL's recovery plan. Will schedules and frequencies be affected in domestic or international routes? And how will the restructuring affect passenger travel? Will it have an effect on employees as well? Please tell us more, Gilbert.
Okay, so your description of Chapter 11, the Chapter 11 process was spot on. Chapter 11 refers to Chapter 11 of U.S. Bankruptcy Code, which refers to reorganization of a company, as you say, reducing our debts and adjusting our contracts and our obligations in order to reflect future business that is quite different from the previous one. And our creditors will have a say in the plan, right? That is very different from Chapter 7, which is a liquidation and the end of the enterprise. So we selected a Chapter 11 process in the US because it's widely recognized around the world, and most of our creditors, especially the ones who own the aircraft, are not in the Philippines. And so the US process was going to be transparent and easy for them to understand. Now, what does that mean? It means we will continue to operate while we are going through the process. I'm happy to report that last night we had our what we call second day hearings, and every single motion passed with no objection. including the debtor in possession financing motion, which opens up the financing that we had set up for this process completely, as well as all the other motions to continue doing business in due course, right, in a normal business as usual basis. And while we are not yet out of the Chapter 11 process, the judge did compliment us on how well organized our process was. And in fact, we will have no unsecured creditors committee, which is very unusual for a Chapter 11 process because our creditors are all alongside. And the judge was very complimentary and said it was the quickest hearing she'd ever had to preside over. So I'm very happy to report that we are marching along the process we set up. And we will continue operating, and passengers' tickets will be honored. And as soon as restrictions start to lift, when the pandemic starts to loosen its grip on the Philippines, then we will be able to fly more people back to their homes in the Philippines, in the region, and beyond.
So will schedules and frequencies be affected in domestic or international routes?
They've already been affected. They'll just get better as more capacity is put back in place as soon as the restrictions are lifted. So both the restrictions inside the Philippines, so we have interzonal restrictions. You can't even drive to Batangas without a PCR test, right? Much less fly to Mindanao. So when vaccinated people can travel with no restrictions, that will open up demand, that will increase demand, open capacity, drop prices, and be a general good thing for our economy and for our people. And the same dynamic will apply to the region as regional restrictions are lifted, and then beyond to the United States and Europe, etc. So there will be more, the schedules will open up, and there will be fewer disruptions other than for weather.
What about your employees? What effect will it have, the restructuring plan, on your employees?
Our employees are quite happy that the restructuring plan has proceeded as expected, and they are assured now of the continued survival of their employer, Philippine Airlines. Right, we completed our retrenchment as part of our restructuring plan before we filed, and so we did the work up front. That was completed in March. We don't anticipate adding more reductions unless, of course, things go south and we have a resurgence of the pandemic. So we hope that doesn't happen.
So Gilbert, can you tell me, if I were a frequent traveler, and will Philippine Airlines still honor my valid tickets, vouchers, my loyalty mileage, and refunds?
Absolutely. Especially the refunds, right? If your refund has not yet been paid, more than a year after you applied, call us, contact us, reach out, right? Because that means there was a failure in our process, because we've almost completed all our refunds as far as our backlogs are concerned. When I hear that people haven't been paid refunds in over a year, I please step up, let us know, because that should no longer be happening. We've been clearing recent refunds caused by the typhoon and other very recent disruptions. So old refunds should no longer be out there. If they are, please, please, please allow us to fix that for you so you can fly again.
There you go. And my next question is for the savvy Filipino traveler. The reduction in your aircraft fleet is also a matter of interest, as Philippine Airlines will delay the delivery of some Airbus planes. How will this affect the operations and keep you on track to recovery?
A part of Philippine Airlines' problem in 2019, even with $3 billion in revenue, at that point, we were overfleeted. We had too many aircraft. And having too many aircraft means you have too many assets you need to pay for. And that led to a situation where when the pandemic hit, we had way more debt than we knew how to handle. And so we had to refleet and reduce the size of our fleet, rather, and reduce the options we have for aircraft to fly to different destinations, pull back on some routes that were not economic, and reduce frequencies where it made sense, right? Given that demand is still about 70% below where it was before the pandemic, right? There's still plenty of capacity to go back to. but we have enough of a fleet to last us into a repeat of 2019. So we have enough aircraft for us to go into 2019 again, right? Which we anticipate will happen in 2024 or later. Now, if it so happens that demand spikes much faster, as it has for the domestic market in the United States, then we will be happy to rent used aircraft that are sitting in the deserts of the world right now, waiting for new owners to take them over.
How long do you surmise before our aviation industry will return to normal?
We will return to normal when the economy returns to normal. So we happen to be a leading indicator when they shut the travel down in order to protect the economy from a pandemic. By definition, it drops our revenue to zero, right? And so once they reopen the economy, will also be a leading indicator for the recovery. And the recovery will really be in place when we're no longer worried about level alert 1, 2, 3, 4, MECQ, GCQ, A1Q, etc.
That's true. In filing for Chapter 11, Philippine Airlines is repositioning itself for long-term growth and profitability. And the first good news from the U.S. Chapter 11 court was the approval of your motion to voluntarily restructure your finances. And the court approved your restructuring plan to reduce the company's obligations by $2 billion, as you said earlier, to help it recover from the pandemic. Please take us through some of the steps, like the infusion of new obligations and equity funding to provide sufficient liquidity for the airline, and the additional financing from global investors to help you through post-restructuring activities.
Sure. Chapter 11, the Chapter 11 process we entered into in a voluntary, prearranged basis, which means we negotiated with our creditors before we filed. And what that means is we agreed with the creditors new terms of our contracts with each independent individual creditor on a bilateral basis, and then collectively assured the creditors that while our level of business with them might drop, they will be assured of continuing to do business with us into the future. Therefore, they reduced our debt obligations by over $2 billion, as you had called out. And in return, in order for us to have the working capital to continue to operate, our shareholders had agreed to provide debtor in possession financing, which is the kind of financing that exists within a Chapter 11 process. Nobody will lend to a company that's bankrupt, right? And our shareholders had basically not only indicated willingness, they had actually, in a process where we talked to other investors, they indicated that they were willing to, they were willing to take the lead. And so our debtor in possession financing was led entirely by our shareholders. And at the appropriate time when we exit the Chapter 11 process, some of that will be converted to equity, some of that will be converted to long-term debt. And then we will raise, as Philippine Airlines, once we exit, we will be back into the marketplace with a balance sheet now that banks can lend to, and we'll be in a position to approach other lenders for what we call exit financing that will help assure our creditors and shareholders of sufficient liquidity leading into the future.
Earlier, you were talking about how the airline can recover as long as the restrictions, the lockdowns, border restrictions go back to normal. How is the airline, on that note, how is the airline coping with the frequent changes in quarantine, lockdowns, border restrictions?
With as much agility as we can muster. So, what's interesting about Philippine Airlines, because it is a flag carrier, we are in very close touch with the government. We've been partnering with them since the beginning of the pandemic, when we started repatriating Filipinos home as early as the Diamond Princess in February of last year, and the first Filipino crewmen were stuck in a ship in Japan. we manage that repatriation. We manage the repatriation in and out of the Philippines of Filipinos and foreigners.
Yes.
We continue to do so. And we've been flying commercial routes. We've been flying the vaccines in. We've been flying supplies in. We've never stopped. So, we anticipate that the restrictions will continue to be in place. So one of our responses, for example, is we from ASEAN countries, we will fly to other airports than Manila because the restriction on arrival limits of 2,000 passengers is in Manila. So we will fly to Subic, Davao, Lawag, and General Santos has opened up. Zamboanga has opened up. And we will look at other airports that can take either our narrow bodies or our wide bodies and fly overseas foreign flights into those cities where the passengers can quarantine and follow the requisite quarantine regulations, after which we will take them to their final destinations in the Philippines. That way we open the country up some more without creating more stress in the Manila hospital environment, because part of the reason the restrictions are in place is to ensure we have the appropriate level of hospital capacity to deal with any surge. As the surge lifts, hopefully these restrictions will lift and we will continue to fly wherever it is we need to fly to bring Filipinos home or to bring Filipinos out.
Mhm. Okay, so now these are the questions of a layperson on the street. How long will the rehab take, and is there a set estimate?
We expect to exit the Chapter 11 formal process before the end of the year, but clearly that's up to the judge to determine.
Mhm.
Given the judge's comments last night that we were very organized and that she hadn't seen a DIP approval process with no objections, and the fact that we don't have an unsecured creditor committee, we see no major obstructions to actually completing the process before the end of this year. So this is very, very different than the old process that Philippine Airlines undertook in 1998 after the Asian crisis, when it took 7-8 years to exit rehabilitation.
Mhm. And what are your projections? When will we have an uptick in numbers?
Well, as long as we're allowed to fly more passengers from month into month, we should have an uptick. We are now entering what typically will be the peak period for travel in the Philippines, the so-called bear months.
Mhm.
And the challenge will be, if you are a Filipino living overseas, like a place like the United States or the Middle East, you have 2 weeks of vacation that allows you to go home for Christmas and New Year,
Mhm.
but you have to spend 10 days in a hotel in quarantine. You probably will not travel.
Yes.
If that quarantine is reduced to 5 days, then you will, right? And so we anticipate an uptick. And we've been transforming our business even as we made the changes that we needed to make to our balance sheet. We've been changing our business as well. And we will have a very laser focus on delivering the right service to our passengers, because it's very clear to us our passengers are willing to pay for the service,
Mhm.
right? And we will make sure we will not forget the Filipino passenger, because without the Filipino passenger, we will not exist.
That's true.
So we will make sure that is done. That will lead us to profitability and a sustained future.
That's true. I know you understand how invested Filipinos are in knowing the fate of PAL. Like, for example, like me, bilang magulang, if I have a son who wants to be a pilot, sasabihin ko na, diyan ka sa Philippine Airlines, di ba? Ako nung bata ko, gusto kong maging flight attendant ng Philippine Airlines, no? So I know you understand how invested Filipinos are and hopeful for the future of PAL and what will happen. What's the biggest risk do you think, to the success of PAL's restructuring, if there's one, and what will be the challenge to PAL after its restructuring?
Our biggest risk remains the nature of the pandemic. We just dealt with a Delta variant, and it looks like we are exiting the surge of the Delta variant. We can't predict whether another variant might be in the works or another virus might be in the works that could create what they call a black swan event that will lead us back to a 2020 level type of lockdown, right? And after 2 years of this, everyone's exhausted. And that is the most unpredictable part of it, because we've been dealing with the completely unexpected from early last year. And so it's very hard for us to plan going forward and say this is the one single risk we're concerned about, right? There are lots of risks. If fuel prices spike because of either unusual demand or unusual limitation in supply for whatever reason, then that will be a threat to the entire aviation industry and the transportation sector in the Philippines, as well as the Philippine economy, since we are so dependent on imported fuel, right? Among other things. So I could go through a whole laundry list of risks. In general, we have mitigated what we could by making sure our balance sheet is stronger and that we have a much more laser-like focus on our ability to make a profit, right? Break even and fly profitably. And we think we know how to do that. Right. And if nothing outside of the ordinary occurs, we anticipate Philippine Airlines, what we call the great 80-year-old lady, will continue to fly. So that is our responsibility. And we have no intention of giving her up at all.
Right. Despite the exhaustion and uncertainty, what is the secret to the resilience of Philippine Airlines?
Oh, it's people. Without question, it's people. Now, Philippine Airlines, I have a kind of nice anecdote. In early last year, during the crisis around the emergence of COVID, when it was still called SARS-CoV-2, right? Not yet COVID-19. And the Diamond Princess was the one singular event that the world was looking at, right? And we needed to evacuate Filipinos. There clearly was a debate internal to Philippine Airlines about whether we would fly or not, because one concern was we don't want to be the entity responsible for bringing the virus into the Philippines, right? That could potentially be a destroyer of our brand. And the government called and said, nobody else is going to fly them home. And so I said, okay, I'll find volunteers. If there are no volunteers, we can't fly. And we got hundreds of volunteers. So we flew. And we continue to fly.
That's true. The loyalty and reverence of its employees have buoyed PAL through this crisis.
Yep. And the loyalty and the support of the Filipino people.
That's true. Yes.
Right? Every OFW flight for us has been a lifeline.
That's right. Despite the, I think you mentioned this earlier, despite having gone through the worst years, one of the worst years in aviation, PAL had its bright spots. Like you said, PAL actively participated in the transport of vital medical supplies to different provinces. And I'm happy to note PAL also was at the forefront of repatriation efforts with different countries. Could you tell us more about more bright spots from PAL?
The pandemic has been a general bright spot for us, right? It's things about challenges like this that take you outside of your fixation on the enterprise alone, right? The people of Philippine Airlines in the middle of last year were less concerned about, is PAL going to survive? They were very concerned about, is my family going to be okay, right? And in that case, you know, their contribution to the recovery of the Philippines or the defense of the Philippines from COVID was to mount those flights and was to make sure that Philippine Airlines was there for all the sweepers that picked up foreigners all over the Philippines, flew them into our hub airports, and then flew them home. And then bringing Filipinos back from places like Tajikistan and Beirut, where we normally don't fly, and you never see the tail and the name of the Philippines on the plane. We flew there last year, and it kept a lifeline open. It was a symbol of hope for us.
True. How has PAL helped the country in this pandemic? Like, how essential is the recovery of PAL in a time of pandemic?
Well, you know, we were absolutely essential during the pandemic, but we as an airline and as part of the aviation business, you know, we are absolutely essential in connecting an archipelagic country, you know, with each other. You don't take a ship from Davao to Manila Nobody really does that anymore. Nobody's done that since I was a boy living in Mindanao, right? You flew, and you generally flew on Philippine Airlines. Now they have choices. Most people have choices. But in order to link the islands together, you fly. And it's not just passengers, right? You know, one of the reasons why we fly wide bodies into General Santos is it's one of the biggest sources of cargo, right, for the world, right? We fly tuna to Japan and the US and Canada from Jansan, but we also fly fruit and seafood into Manila from Mindanao through General Santos and Davao and Cagayan de Oro and places like that. And so we are deeply in tune with the market. You know, it's fruit season now. Unfortunately, the mangosteens didn't flower as well as they were expected to in Mindanao this year. So the mangosteen harvest is down, but pomelos are up. And for those who eat durian, durian is up. Lots of cheap, very delicious durian. And we're plugged into that because people will ship it on us, right? And our bellies are full of cargo because economic activity won't cease. You know, we'll bring balut from Central Luzon to Mindanao and then fruit and fish on the way back, etc. And these are essential activities that everyone takes for granted, but we provide what we call the metal to make it happen.
In a slightly larger perspective, are you also keeping an eye out how other airlines in the region are coping?
Yes, we are. We are keeping a very close eye because we are kindred airlines, right? We are part of IATA and also the Association of Asia Pacific Airlines, AAPA, and we keep track of what our governments are doing on restrictions, virus prevention, infection prevention, etc. And we've been keeping track of policy responses of different governments and helping each other with data and information. Right? So we have stayed in close touch, and we do want to make sure that the airlines around the region, especially the ones with whom we have code shares, are aware that we will continue to operate, that they can connect to our flights, and that we can continue to do business with each other, because we will connect people and cargo with other airlines as a matter of course, as we have before the pandemic, and all airlines, right? Especially us being a long-time network carrier. We have a lot more in the way of code shares and interline agreements than other airlines in the Philippines.
Mm-hmm. And I also see that PAL has renewed its vigor in its marketing and sales efforts with new programs like Fly Now, Pay Later. I also read about the Hiraya Flight Pass, which allows passengers to pre-purchase flights with open travel dates for all domestic routes, with invigorated promotions and renewed partnerships with other airlines. Could you tell us more about these?
Well, you ain't seen nothing yet, right? As they say. We will continue to roll these out. Passengers have been asking for these things for years. Okay. The fact that there was a pandemic allowed us the time and the bandwidth to actually start making changes that were essential, not just to marketing programs, but actually to the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure that now underlies most enterprises in the Philippines even. Everybody's digital now. So we're making sure that we have products and services that customers want and are willing to pay for.
Mm-hmm. Seeing all these activities, promotions, and positive mindset in PAL, I'm really happy for the airline and how your plans are all coming together. Now, Gilbert, someone once told me that Philippine Airlines And today we are privileged to have on the show the President and Chief Operating Officer of the Philippine Airlines, Mr. Gilbert Santa Maria. Mr. Santa Maria was a former COO of the US-based BPO company Ibex Global. He has a master's in public and private management from the Yale University School of Management.
Eagle News will be back with more stories. Please don't go away.
This portion is brought to you by Innovexcel Printing Services, excellence in innovation. For inquiries, you may call Mark D. Mayuga at 0917-900-6396.
Araw-araw sa panahon ngayon, may daming tanong kailangan dapat nagkwentuhan. Ang sigaw ng Pinoy Nation. Information, education. Ating saloobin, ipakita natin ang sagot sa problema natin. Ano sa palagay nyo? Ano sa palagay nyo? Ano sa palagay nyo?
Welcome back to the news, and now we have live with our ABC Bureau Chief in Europe, Ms. Marilu Francisco. She will show us how learning a new language can help during the pandemic. Ms. Malu.
Oh, hi. Good evening to both of you, Alma and CJ. And it's nice to be back with you and to be with our viewers. Well, while on lockdown during the pandemic, many of us have turned into many different activities that will help us to stay productive and active. And one of the favorites is learning foreign languages. Studies show that there is an increased number of young and adult learners this times of the pandemic. And among the top foreign languages that keep many learners active are the European languages. Talking about the European languages, let me share some information, some interesting facts about the European languages. So here's the video. Did you know that there's a celebration called the European Day of Languages? And this is held every year on the 26th of September. The European Day of Languages began on the 26th of September 2001. The purpose to promote the language and cultural diversity of Europe. More than half of Europe is bilingual or multilingual, that is, people speak or understand 2 or more languages. Most European languages belong to 3 broad groups: Germanic, Romance, and Slavic. And now let's listen to the sounds of some of these languages. 2 examples of Germanic languages, Dutch and Swedish. From the Netherlands, let's welcome Sheena. Hi, how do you say in Dutch? Hello everyone, my name is... Thank you.
Hallo iedereen. Mijn naam is Sheena. Mijn naam is Sheena. Dankjewel. Dankjewel.
From Sweden, here is Ashton. He'll tell us how to say hello, my name is, and thank you.
Hej, mitt namn är Ashton. Hej, mitt namn är Ashton. Tack, tack.
From the group of Romance languages, let's have Spanish and Italian. From Madrid, here is Michelle.
Hola, mi nombre es Michelle.
Michelle just said hello, and my name is in Spanish. What about thank you?
Gracias.
And now, it's time to hear Italian.
Ciao. Il mio nome è Erika Celestino. Il mio nome è Erika Celestino.
Ciao, Erika. How do you say thank you in Italian?
Grazie. Grazie.
We continue. We shall hear the sounds of the languages of the Czech Republic and Russia. Both languages belong to the Slavic group of languages.
Ahoy! Marisa Hazel Ann. Marisa Hazel Ann.
Děkuji.
Ready for some Russian words? Here's Emmy to say, hello, my name is, and goodbye in Russian.
Здравствуйте. Меня зовут Esmeralda Coloma. Меня зовут Esmeralda Coloma. Прощай. Прощай.
Right. So, a glimpse of the European languages. And I'd like to thank all the participants that took time to send us some words and phrases in the languages that they grew up with or they're still learning. So that's it, Alma. I hope it inspires you to learn foreign languages. And there are indeed limitless benefits of learning foreign languages. And even studies have shown that learning a foreign language can help you stay mentally alert. And it helps you develop and enhance your thinking process, your cognitive skills, and also it enhances memory. And for people of my age out there, according to medical studies, it delays the onset of Alzheimer's. So, another thing, it's a way to travel nowadays, learning foreign languages, because part of learning a foreign language is talking about culture of the speakers of the native language. And so, what a journey it is. You learn how people say things, how they do things, and why. Like, for example, if I say in German, good evening, guten Abend, and if we happen to meet somewhere, we usually shake hands. That's before the COVID-19. Okay. And it is really a must that every time you meet, you shake hands and you greet each other and you shake hands. And well, there are many other interesting things, and there is fun in learning foreign languages. You
You've been
must have
there.
noticed,
Yes, go
yeah,
ahead. Yes.
you must have noticed that some words in a certain language are also found in another language. Let me give you an example, and this is really a very interesting discovery. The word gift in English is something very nice, right? Something you give to someone who is celebrating his or her birthday. The German language also has that word. Same spelling, same pronunciation, but the meaning is different. And you know what it is? Poison. That's the meaning of gift
Wow.
in German. So better be careful when you come to Germany. All right. So
That's fun.
join the
You've been
journey.
there for how many years now, Malu?
Well, here in Europe, I've been here over 30 years and it's
Wow.
really quite a journey. It's
Uh-huh.
quite a journey. And the people, actually, our speakers, I met them while traveling. And
Oh, interesting.
yes, so we keep the friendship. We
Mhm.
keep the friendship. And when I started learning German in Germany, I met a lot of international students because when we were in class, the students came from different countries like Switzerland, Romania, and all that, and Turkey. So you'd be talking about your own cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And,
What
yeah.
is harder to learn though? German? What language?
Language.
Yeah,
Mhm.
in Europe.
Well,
It's,
I'd say the first foreign language, first English, which is also a European language. We have England here, and then Spanish. During my time, CJ, Spanish was a compulsory subject. Yeah,
yes,
Right.
that's
in
true.
Yeah.
university.
Yes.
Yes. So
Mhm.
I had 2 years of Spanish. Yep. And so when I go to Madrid and I start saying, oh, buenos dias. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Hablo
You can
español,
really
pero
converse with them.
poquito. Yeah. Estudié español en la universidad, pero no tengo práctica. Wow. It sounds so impressive. But then when they start prolonging the conversation, wait a minute, I'll have my next lesson tomorrow. The next lesson is tomorrow. Yeah. So,
Well, it is really fun to be learning new languages and meeting new people. And I think the key is to keep friends who speak the language so you can really converse with them and practice, right?
yes. And also, and CJ, right now, you can, because of the globalization, you can meet people online and
That's
practice
true.
the language. And also, you can make your own program so that you can learn the language on your own. And
Oh,
there's
yeah.
an abundant supply of materials online. So,
Mm-hmm.
for those
Well,
who have
thank
already
you.
embarked on this journey, learning a foreign language, especially during these times, go on, enjoy the journey, enjoy it.
True.
Well, it is really going to be enjoyable for a lot of us if we just start with that journey. Thank you so much, Ms. Marlu, for your story and for inspiring all of us to try to learn some new language during the pandemic.
All right.
true.
And thank
Stay
you.
with
And
us.
thank you. So, CJ, I'd like to invite you to watch and listen to my regular segment every week. That is
Yes.
German is fun, Deutsch macht Spaß.
Thank you so much. I will be watching that. I'll be joining you.
You're
And
welcome.
stay with us while we say goodbye, Malu. Say goodbye with us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for
Well,
having me.
no, don't go away. You're going to
Don't
be
go away,
saying
Malu.
goodbye in
Yes.
German. That's
Yes.
it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. The news continues tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, as I always say, there remains so much more to be grateful for. Mauma Angeles and Malu, thank you.
We live
In interesting times.